Welcome to Knowledge and Proclamation. Today we are going to continue our lessons in the I am teachings of Jesus Christ found in the Gospel of John. Last week we went over Jesus saying, I am the bread of life. And this week we will move into his teaching in John chapter 8, where Jesus refers to himself with the I am terminology of the Old Testament and adds the descriptor, the light of the world. Remember that these teachings grew out of our understanding of who God is. God is the beginning of all being, the source of all being, the source of all life. And we said, what better descriptor of a entity who is the source of all being, who is the source of all life, than to reveal himself in the term I am. I exist. This is exactly what the covenant name of Yahweh means in the Old Testament. I am. I exist. And then we fast forwarded to the time of Jesus, and we see that he refers to himself with the same terminology, the covenant name of God, and then he adds these descriptors. I am the bread of life. I am the light of the world. And in these descriptors, we can find out a little bit about God, how he relates to us. We learn about Jesus's divinity. And these topics and concepts are very important for the Christian. So we're going to dive right in and find out what we can learn about Jesus as he uses the I am terminology and describes himself as the light of the world. This lesson comes from John chapter 8, verses 12 through 30. I must confess that this lesson will focus mainly on one verse, and that is John chapter 8, verse 12. So I encourage you to take time to read the full passage and get a full understanding of what's happening. Jesus actually uses that I am terminology 2 to 3 times in this single passage here. So it's very clear what Jesus is doing when he's referring to himself. Even at one point, he says, if you do not believe that I am he, that's that ego, I, me, I am. This is a special use of the word I am to refer to himself with the covenant name of God, the God of the Old Testament. He says, if you do not believe that I am he, then you do not have life. So there's some perfect points where Jesus refers to his deity and his identity as God in the flesh. So, as we go into John chapter 8, verse 12, it's important to note that this encounter with Jesus comes after his encounter with the adulterous woman. If you read above there, you'll see the story where Jesus stops the adulterous woman from being stoned by asking the accusers that he who is without sin to cast the first stone. Each one recognizing that they have sinned, they have sinned in their life, they're not perfect, and they all drop the stones and walk away. What you notice is that these events are not necessarily chronologically connected because the author does nothing to connect them chronologically. Also, remember the overall theme of the Gospel of John is so that you might believe that Jesus is the Son of God, that he is the Messiah, and that in believing you will have eternal life. So John may not be communicating these stories of Jesus in a chronological manner, but they are significant. They have meaning. They are connected thematically, all going toward his ultimate goal of saying these events show Jesus to be the Son of God, to be the Messiah, and they are there for you to believe. So Jesus continues after that encounter into the I am teaching. And Jesus begins. He says, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. Now, for us to fully capture what Jesus means here, we must close the historical and cultural gap between Jesus' time and our modern reading of the text. From verse 20, we see that Jesus is giving this teaching in the temple treasury. And because of that, the timing is believed to be during the Feast of Tabernacles. Now, during the Feast of Tabernacles, in this part of the temple, there were 4 75-foot tall candles, actually, and above each of these columns, there were 4 golden bowls filled with oil. And when those bowls were filled with oil, there was old clothes and belts used to fashion a wick to burn just like a candle would. And this was the job of the priest of the temple, to climb a ladder, to fashion a wick, and to light these bowls. So you have 4 columns. Each column has 4 bowls on top. You have 16 huge bowls of oil burning throughout the temple. It would have lit up the whole temple. And the Jewish writings say that this light could be seen throughout all of Jerusalem. This lighting ceremony, I believe they called it the illumination of the temple. And so this light could be seen throughout all the city. The people would dance and sing praises to God because it was a reminder of their ancient history where God led them out of Egypt by a pillar of fire. And it was also forward looking to the moment when God would send the light. This was the Messiah, the person that was going to come and restore the kingdom of Israel and restore Israel to all of her splendor and glory. These are the strong theological themes that are going on during this illumination ceremony. Now, if you can imagine Jesus standing up in the midst of all this imagery, in the midst of all this theological significance, and he says these words, I am the light of the world. He does not claim to be the light of the Hebrews or the light of Jerusalem, or he doesn't claim to be even the person who sent the fire to protect the Hebrews. He is the light of the world. He is a fuller revelation of their history and their forward-looking prophecy. Jesus is pointing all of this theological significance to himself. He uses the I am terminology, the covenant name of God from the Old Testament, and then he says that I am the light of the world. Anyone who follows me will not walk in darkness, but they will have the light of life. All of this theological significance, and Jesus stands up and makes this bold claim. You can see everyone around him would have been confused. They would have squint their eyes. They would have mumbled amongst themselves. Is he saying that he is the light of our ancestors? And not only that, even greater, because that light shone to the people of God that were saved from Egypt. But he claims that anyone throughout the world who follows him will have this light and will never walk in darkness. So this is what Jesus is saying. All of this theological significance, he is pointing it to himself. Now, if you take a moment to read what happens in Exodus chapter 13, when the light or the fire went before the people of God at night, it allowed them to flee from the Egyptians during the dark hours, during nighttime. So they were able to gain more ground and get farther away from the Egyptians because they didn't have to slow down at night. They were able to follow the pillar of fire and continue to travel into the wilderness. Now, not only did the fire play a role in leading them out of Egypt, the fire, if you read that in Exodus chapter 13, also played a role in protecting them. It slowed down the Egyptian armies and confused the Egyptian armies, giving the people of God time to flee, giving them time to be saved from the Egyptians. And likewise, Jesus, as the light of the world, he is the light that leads the people of God out of darkness, out of spiritual darkness. If you follow Christ, you will be led out of spiritual darkness. Not only that, but Jesus, the light of the world, plays a protective role for all those who follow him. Not only will they never walk in darkness, they will always have this light to lead them and guide them into all truth, but it is also going to protect them. Again, we see the doctrine of assurance here. Remember, Jesus, when he was claiming to be the bread of life, we talked about the assurance the believer has that Jesus is not going to lose one of his believers. Here we see that same theme again. Because the light protected the ancient people of God and ensured their passage away from the Egyptians, so Jesus, the light of the world, protects the believer today and ensures that their soul will be delivered into glory. What a wonderful thought to know that the God of all creation, that Yahweh, the great I am of the Old Testament, protects the believer today just as he did the ancient people of God when they were fleeing from the Egyptians. God will ensure through his Son, Jesus Christ, that every believer will never walk in darkness and that their soul will be delivered to the other side into the presence of glory because of this light, because of Jesus Christ. Now remember, not only did the illumination ceremony look backward into Israel's history with the pillar of fire, but it also looked forward to the coming of the light. That is to say, the Messiah God was going to send into the world to throw off the enemies of Israel, the people of God, and restore them to glory, restore their kingdom, provide a king that was going to sit on the throne and rule forever. This was part of their prophecy. We see that in Isaiah, when he's speaking of the Messiah, he says the Messiah will be a light to the nations and salvation to the ends of the earth. On another occasion, Isaiah says that the coming Messiah will be a covenant for all the people and a light to the nations. Jesus focuses all this prophecy, all this theological significance, all of the hopes and dreams of the people of Israel. He focuses that on himself. He says that I am the fulfillment of all of the things you have been looking for. I am the light not only to Jerusalem, not only to the ancient people of God, but to the future people of God. And everyone that believes in me has this light, will never walk in darkness. They will be protected. Their souls will be ensured safe passage to the other side. And if they follow me, they will have the light of life. Jesus is saying all of this just in this simple passage. He wants to let them know, and he's letting the modern day reader know that just as the people of Jerusalem would light up the temple, and from anywhere in the city they could look up and see this amazing light, so today anyone who looks up to Jesus Christ and believes in him, they can receive that same light, the same guidance in spiritual darkness, the same protection, assuring salvation for them. Jesus does all of this for the believer. And remember, he is never going to lose one believer. His light will always shine. He will always point his believers into truth and righteousness. There was a popular revivalist during early America who wrote a song describing Jesus to be the light of the world. And his song simply says, "All ye saints of light proclaim, Jesus the light of the world. Life and mercy are in his name, Jesus the light of the world. We'll walk in the light, the beautiful light. Come where the dewdrops of mercy shine bright. Shine all around us by day and by night. Jesus, the light of the world." Thank you for watching Knowledge and Proclamation. I hope that you enjoyed this lesson. Please follow us on YouTube and also check us out at our blog, knowledgeandproclamation.com. Please leave your comments. I would love to know what you think, and I will be sure to respond to you because I appreciate each and every one of you guys who take the time to watch these videos. Thank you.